Are you ready to hear the next steps in Dr. Chelsea Mooreland's career journey to being a practice owner of Life Cycle Direct Primary Care in Columbus, Ohio? Well, if so, you are in for a treat. Welcome back to the Black Med Connect podcast, affectionately known as the BMed podcast, where we share inspiring stories of Black physicians and physicians in training. I'm your host, Dr. Jasmine Weiss, and I'm so excited to continue this discussion with Dr. Chelsea Mooreland. Let's jump right into the episode. Roll the music. Just kind of for those who may not really understand the different types of family medicine programs, can you share like what it means to be an opposed program or unopposed program and kind of the different flavors of family medicine residency programs that exist?
Yeah, and there are literally so many. Even just here in Columbus, again, there's 3 programs. That technically, it was 3 programs. There are now 4. Each of them, even though 3 of them are within the same system, are drastically different. And so you have programs that, like you mentioned, are unopposed, meaning that you are on that specific rotation. There are no other residents competing for patients in that rotation. So if you're in the ED, you're doing everything in the ED. There's no ED fellow or resident doing it. And then you just kind of get what's left over or shadow them. Same thing with OB. When we were on OB, it was us doing it. Like we became the OB residents for that rotation. Nobody else intervened in that process. We did the deliveries versus in most of the other systems, their OB experience was definitely opposed. So there was an OB residency as part of that. And they kind of just joined in to get a view of what it could mean to follow this woman all the way through to delivery. And a lot of those programs, you don't even have to do the deliveries yourself. You just have to experience them because they're not really giving you the exposure to come out and do it. They're just giving you the exposure so you understand how what you're doing in primary care impacts this mom at delivery and kind of what can go wrong and what to recognize as a complication when moms come to see you afterwards. And so the unopposed and opposed part was definitely a big part of the decision because I wanted to go in a place that I got to do all the hands-on stuff. I love doing procedures. And again, I wanted to keep options open. So I knew the more skills I could put in my bag, the more choices I would have at the end as to exactly what I wanted to do if I ever wanted to narrow my skill set. And I knew I'd be more confident. So even though going into residency, I didn't think I was going to like inpatient medicine, because my rotation experience was like, this is terrible. We around for 8 hours. I'm never doing this.
Exactly.
But when I got to residency, even though it was hard, it was so rewarding to go to codes and to put in central lines and be able to be the person, who brings this person back to life in some scenarios, honestly. And not because, it makes you feel, I'm saying some people probably feel like that, but not because it makes you feel that way, but more so when you think about health inequities, some of the things that you see in the hospitals, you see bias in the way people provide care. And you see bias in, someone has a headache. Am I even going to evaluate them, make sure they don't have a brain tumor or hemorrhaging, other things? Or am I just going to say, she's complaining of pain, she's a pain seeker, get out of the hospital. And so when the rubber meets the road, being able to be in that space and do what we do was important to me as a Black woman. And I was in a largely urban hospital setting. So I absolutely loved it. And I felt like it was the most gritty, I would say, system in the area. A lot of the other programs are very outpatient centered. So majority of their rotations are outpatient. Even when they're on other rotations, they have time in the outpatient setting, which we did, but it was like a half day. It was very much so when you are on this service, you are on this service line. You become the nephrologist, you become the cardiologist, and then you come back to outpatient medicine. So that was the biggest difference that I noticed. So some programs, people come out and they're just ready to see, 18, 20 patients a day in the office. Other programs, you come out and you're ready to do procedures and do OB and do gyne, and really you're ready for whatever walks through that door. Not just to do the workup and send people out, but actually to do whatever procedural thing that they need. And I would say unique to our program, about half of our residents who finished our family medicine program went on to do some type of subspecialty in family medicine. So we had people who did sports medicine fellowships. We had someone who did a barometric medicine fellowship.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of them would do hospitalist fellowships, which again, people think of only internal medicine, but that isn't the case. And, who would have known, right? Like I had no idea that you could
Yeah.
go be a hospitalist or, and round on patients and do all this stuff as a family medicine physician. Yeah. And then you have people like me who decide to still do almost everything and still do deliveries. So, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that too. And it's so interesting. I want to double back. You said, feeling like you were there for the patients. How did the patients receive you? Because I remember times where just a little nod or a little, I'm so happy to see you wave, just being in the space. What was it like for you, especially knowing that you said you're very isolated in med school, in residency? What was that experience like for you?
I would say it was a season of rebuilding. Like I felt like med school kind of beat me down. And residency for me, like even though there were tons of long nights, we did tons of weekends and 24-hour calls and days in the hospital because we were so inpatient focused. But the people I was there with were people that I knew had my back. Our residency program was diverse. And so even though our faculty, if you look at our faculty, you would say maybe not, but our residents were diverse. We had residents from literally every state and country that you can think of. And so it made that experience amazing. But then walking into rooms with patients that looked like us. And like you said, the nod, the smile, they kind of looking like, wait, you're the doctor.
Like what?
It was a season of rebuilding and kind of reaffirming why I did this and why it was worth it. And reaffirming that I am qualified and people want me in this space. Because I think, being in the space where you are in the minority in many med school classrooms, you can start to feel, or I should say, you just start to kind of believe the message that's being given to you, that you are somehow less than and somehow accidentally got there because of affirmative action and all these things that people say when, really that's not true. But when you're around it all the time, it's hard to not take some of that in. Yeah. And develop what you have, imposter syndrome. And so initially coming into it, it's like, oh my gosh, okay, now I gotta do the stuff that I read about. But like you say, walking into these rooms, even seeing, the janitorial staff, the nurses, people in the cafeteria, like it was amazing to see them light up. Like they saw themselves in me. I was a resident. I wasn't the attending, but it still gave them a sense of peace and joy that there was someone that looked like them in this space to be there when they needed it. Yeah. So it was a season of rebuilding and just feeling really happy to be there.
Yes. Shout out to environmental services and food services for keeping us uplifted, because there were many nights where their fist bumps, their encouragement kept me going. So shout out, just because I feel like we don't do that enough. We don't tell them thank you, not even for the patient care they deliver and how they treat patients, but how they even treat us. So thank you guys.
Absolutely.
I love that your class was diverse and it kind of helped you. I love that you called it a rebuild too, and reaffirming. Can you talk a bit about your next transition from residency, where you had that breadth of experience, lots of procedural experience, inpatient experience? What was it like transitioning now to being an attending? And what was that like for you to start? And then now with your current practices, which I would love to hear more about and let our audience hear more about as well.
Yeah. So I felt actually a little bit kind of limited when I finished residency, because not limited in skill set, but I had taken the National Health Service Corps scholarship when I was in med school. And that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But what I didn't know is that it was going to drastically limit where I could work and how I could work. And so I couldn't decide to stay in or to do a hospitalist fellowship. I couldn't decide to go do a sports medicine fellowship. I couldn't decide to stay there working as a
Dr.
hospitalist.
Mooreland?
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. We're going to pause for a second because you froze.
Oh, okay.
So could you just repeat? You were saying you couldn't decide. Maybe if you could just start that part over, that would be great.
Yeah. So because of that scholarship, I couldn't decide to go into fellowship. I couldn't decide to stay on as a hospitalist or even to be full-time faculty. And so I was extremely limited, and the places that I could work didn't allow me to do certain things. So all of these skills I thought to learn because I wanted to bring them into our communities, I now felt like, man, what if I lose these things over the next couple of years that I'm committed to this space? And so that was really difficult for me, kind of accepting that I had to be somewhere for another 2 years. And so that transition, it was difficult for that reason. I felt like I didn't really have a lot of options, and that the options I did have did not look good. But so in my first job, which my grandparents all are in Detroit, were in Detroit. They all work for Ford Motor Company. All I've known is people who have been committed to these brands and these companies that have been committed to them. And so I'm thinking of this job as this long-term commitment that, man, this is such an important decision, when really most of us don't stay in our first role very long because we're still finding our way. And so in my first job, I struggled with feeling kind of disconnected because I knew I wasn't going to be here long-term. But then also even just the way medicine is practiced in this space compared to the other space. Working in a federally qualified health center brought about a lot of, I would say, moral conflict for me. I worked with patients that look the same as the patients I served in the hospital setting, but I worked with them in a much lower resource setting, even though we were in the same city. There were things that I just couldn't give them that I could give them down the street, which didn't really make sense to me. And in this particular space, we were probably 6-to-1 nurse practitioner to physician. And at the time, I still had no concept of what a nurse practitioner's training was like. And so when I onboarded with about 4 nurse practitioners who had just graduated from NP school, and then me. And so we hit the ground running day one. I'm being asked questions that to me, honestly, would have been asked by an internal service. And I'm I don't have time to teach. But at the same time, if I don't teach, then what happens to these patients who look like me, who look like you? And so it was just a constant conflict every single day. And we were seeing loads of patients. So I literally started out seeing week 1, 18 to 20 patients every day. And that was what I finished residency seeing. So I'm learning a new system, learning a new way of doing everything, a new medical record system, seeing this volume. And the pathology, because most of these patients were really high risk, had lots of chronic medical problems, hadn't been to a doctor, were new to the country, didn't speak English as a first language. So it was all of these factors for almost every patient, which wasn't the case really in residency. And then having that barrier of time and capacity. But so that was just the first couple of weeks. So this was part of the ramp up, which I was like, wait, the template's wrong. The template is wrong.
This is not a ramp up, guys.
I'm we didn't agree to this. I didn't sign this. No. So, and then they're actually, you're going to eventually be at a template of 36 patients a day. And I was I'm going to be at work. I'm you can't find a residency in town where anyone finishes seeing 36 patients a day. And those are patients that we knew, that we had been following for years. These were patients that weren't even assigned to us. So we didn't have a panel. They just saw whoever schedule they ended up on. So that was just really hard for me, coming from this setting where I felt like we had all the support and we had the resources. And even if the resource, even if the patient didn't have the resource, the hospital just provided it because we were in training. And so I was, thinking that spaces would be that way, and it wasn't. What was not there, they didn't get. Who was not there, they didn't see. And that's just what it was. And so I found myself probably about 6 months in, honestly feeling exhausted. I was what is this? I was tired all the time. I was irritable more than I'd ever been probably in life. Even during the isolation period, I had nothing to give. I would just go to work, kind of get through the day, get home. I felt like I wasn't even in my life, if that makes sense. It was just so strange. And then I realized I was depressed and anxious because of my job, but I had to finish this time. Otherwise, I would owe the government all this money. So I decided I got to make an exit strategy. I need to know, what am I going to do next that is not possible to feel like this? Because if I continue feeling like that, I would have left medicine altogether, which
and that's so unfortunate.
Exactly.
Right?
We don't go through all this.
You don't go through all this training to get ready to take care of patients to very first job to feel like it's time to go, right? So exactly. What did you do? How did you create that exit strategy? And even in the midst of that, what did you do to stay balanced? Did you lean on others, or what was your kind of way of getting through that time?
So I was married and had stepchildren and had my biological son right around all at the same time. And so I had them to lean on and keep me grounded and focused. So I just I was a hermit outside of work. I was with my family. I dug into all of my kids' activities and, church with my family to stay grounded and realize the world outside of these walls is still the world that I know. And when I go into this space, I'm kind of going to war every day. And I just accept that when I leave, I get to be at peace again. But it won't be like this forever. So part of that too was having that plan. So, I would stay up crazy amounts of time at night, just writing the vision and making it plain, putting my thoughts on paper, reading books about direct primary care and other healthcare models, literally doing like online lessons to figure out how do I start a business and what that would look like. So it was a lot of work, but having that plan and diving into that, I think is honestly what I would say to an extent saved me. When we think about physician suicide and all of that, like these are the scenarios that create that. And so I was just blessed that I could see it and that I found a way to tunnel that energy and say, I'm going to get out of this. This is temporary. So really, that's what I spent all of that energy, all of that anxiety, and I put it into what was going to happen with my business. And so I had attended a direct primary care conference over the summer, and I was like, this is actually happening in other places. People are doing it this way. Maybe I can do it. And I would say, too, that experience kind of got me to the place where I felt like I didn't have anything to lose. I was like, it can't get worse than this, right? And so to me, that even was kind of a blessing that I wasn't pacified in a system where it was kind of easier to say like, oh, I don't really love it, but I can stay here. Because, that is the enemy of great, right? You just be comfortable. But I was in a space that like I was at rock bottom. So I was like, everything has to be better than this. If y'all can run a practice, I can run a practice. I got this. I got the medicine side. I can figure out the rest of the stuff.
Love that. I'm going to actually pause to say that again, because we don't get the business side of medicine at all in our training. And so the fact that you stayed up late and spent hours trying to figure out a plan and learn about different healthcare models and then said, if they can do it, I can too. I think it's that attitude that really can just propel so many. So I just want to say I admire you for even seeing when your back was against the wall, like there is going to be a path out of this, Are you interested in taking a deeper dive with Black Med Connect? Then join our Black Med Connector newsletter. Each week, you'll hear more about our guests and go behind the scenes to get a deeper dive into their careers. You will get the professional productivity word of the week, and you'll get to see and learn more about amazing physicians doing wonderful things in entrepreneurship and innovation. So head on over to BMED Connect, bmedconnect.com/podcast and join the Black Med Connector newsletter. Back to the episode. Could you share a little bit more about the model for those who don't know what direct primary care is and talk a bit about how you navigate it now to not only practicing, but being an entrepreneur and a practice owner?
Yeah. So direct primary care is essentially what you think of if you think of old school community doctors. The doctor who delivered everyone's baby, who saw all the people in the community, knew all the families, knew all their health conditions, and really was a part of the community. And so DPC gives us an opportunity to do that because in a direct primary care model, we remove insurance. And what a lot of us don't know during training is that insurance in big systems really is what drives the way we deliver care, not how we're taught it. And so in DPC, our patients pay us a monthly fee, like a membership or a subscription to Netflix, or like they pay their cell phone bill, and they have unlimited access to us. They can text, call, email, video visit, and they really do feel like family because they have extended visits. Their appointments are usually 30, 60 minutes, depending on the practice. And you really have an opportunity to invest in the patient and not have to think about RVUs and volume and any of the things. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I wonder the model. But one thing you'll hear most DPC docs say is if you've seen one DPC, you've seen one DPC because it's a free market. All of us can create what we want. Some people want to have an aesthetics arm to their practice. Some people want to have a, obesity medicine arm to their practice. Some people want to be full spectrum and still do OB. So it is very dependent on what practice you're looking at. And so I chose to essentially kind of study people who are already doing DPC. So if anyone is intrigued by it and wants to read on it, there's a book called Startup DPC by Dr. Paul Thomas, based out of Detroit, Michigan. And I loved that he was in Detroit because I was in front of him. So I was like, man, if he can make this work in Detroit, I can make this work in underserved communities because he's doing it, right? Because one of the things you'll hear as kind of a counter to that is like, oh, that's concierge medicine. If people are paying you, how are you going to make it equitable? But what I learned in the FUHC is that you're going to pay one way or another. Someone has to pay the bills. The question is, what's the value that you're getting back for what you're paying? Because if I say you're going to get free care here, but the care is terrible, that's not free healthcare. Like, I'm practicing on you. So, so that's what DPC gives you room to do, is to really make it what you want. So I read his book cover to cover, started writing out a business plan, and then looked online for free courses because there was a moment of, man, do I need to go back to school? Because maybe I need an MBA. I got to have some extra credentials. And I was like, I know the medicine. Like, if you got through medical school, you can learn anything. Like, nothing is as much content in one time as med school. So I started doing a lot of online free classes through the Small Business Development Center, or SBDC. And every state and every city has their own branch. And they offer classes throughout the month that will even literally help you write the whole business plan, help you come up with all your financial projections to be able to go to a bank and say, fund my business. So it was just so enlightening to find out that I didn't even have to go get another degree. I was just qualified. I just had to believe that I was qualified. And so right towards the end of that transition, I had a space that I saw. And it was a space that I had seen right when I finished residency. And I was like, man, wouldn't it be nice if I had a practice? The space is amazing. I got these 2 years. It won't be there. And then the space came available again. And I saw it when I was just browsing on the internet. I was like, God, this is okay.
Is this for me? Is this for me?
I was like, nah, I know you were telling me to do this, but now I really know you were telling me to do this, because the moment I really just started doing it is the moment everything fell in place. The space came in, fell in place. The finances came in, fell in place. All the classes fell in place. Everything just fell into place. And so
Can you talk about that? Can you talk about, first of all, I love that. You said, when I started doing, things fell into place. And I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, we both know our ideas and our vision can be large, but until you just put the wheels in motion just a little bit, things start to just form and shape the minute you start doing that. So I love that about your journey, that just each time, if there's a theme I'm hearing, it's you took action. You saw something was different than you wanted it to be, and you took action. You saw this retail space still available, or not necessarily retail space. I don't know what type of space it was. You saw the space available. You took action. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but please continue.
No, you're good. But yeah, I agree. I think that, again, kind of going back to having been a product of an HBCU, I think there's a certain amount of grit and resilience that I built that, it didn't really matter what roadblock was there. I was going to find a way around it, like it really wasn't no other option. There was never going to be a no as far as I was concerned. And especially, when I combined that with just faith and discernment and trusting that what I felt in the dreams and visions he gave me were possible. Once I did that, I was like, oh, everything just fell into place. So we opened September 2021. And, I think my husband thought I was crazy. He was like, why don't you just go, work for, the hospital? Like, why don't you just go get a normal job, get a regular salary? It's going to be a raise, basically, compared to that FUHC. You get to relax. And I was like, I didn't do this to relax. I did this to get into some good trouble. I did this to shift and to shake what I saw and what I didn't see. And so, yes, it was selecting what would have been a more difficult route, because now I had to come up with workflows and hire people and all the things that we don't normally have to do. But it was necessary to be able to see a change. I couldn't sit back and wait for a system to change. I had to decide, I'm going to change this system. Yeah. And so that's what did it. So my husband thought I was crazy. And he's like, listen, okay, I'm just going to be here cheering you on. And then we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, shout out to him for being supportive, having that support system. And even though pushing you to do it one way, he was still there and supportive of you. So shout out to him for being supportive too. I love that. I feel like we should have you on again just to talk about the business of medicine and entrepreneurial journeys as physicians. I think that's something we share together in common, and I admire you. And if you could talk a little bit about how your practice is going now and what's since 2021, how things been going and what's new and what do you see for the future of your practice? And please give us the name and details as well.
Yeah, so practice is amazing. I mean, I can honestly say, like, outside of choosing family medicine and following my heart there, it was the best decision I could have made. So I founded Lifecycle DVC September 2021, and a lot of DVC practices grow slower than we did. After about a year and 2 months, we were just shy of 200 patients. And so I literally around month 4 or 5, I was at the break-even point. I was able to pay all of our bills and pay my nurse and start to profit and pay back some of the debts as I chose to take out a business loan. So I named the practice Life Cycle Direct Primary Care because of the commitment to being a full spectrum family physician. From a community standpoint, I wanted the practice to really be focused on improving access to equitable care for communities who are largely underserved and disadvantaged and underrepresented. And one of the things that's unique to us compared to other communities is that we really rely heavily on community. And we believe more what our grandparents say than what the doctor says. And so if the person who's providing care isn't really a part of your community, it's really hard to make a change. And so life cycle represents a couple of different things. One, we're following you through all of your life cycles because we all evolve across time, you know, from being a toddler to being an adolescent to going off to college to being married, even being through the losses and the gains. And then, you know, our slogan, it's care that grows with you. And so same thing, but one of the, I guess, kind of things that people probably don't even realize is it's not just through the life cycles. The way that we have designed the practice is that it's kind of like this snowball effect. And so as I add physicians to the practice and as the practice grows in its membership, the profit for the business gets to be reinvested in the patients who belong to this community. And so they get more care, but never have to pay more money. And so as our community in this space grows, so will, you know, the value of the practice to the community. And so that's how we're structured. And I hired on a physician this past fall and bought a building. I bought a medical condo, I should say. Thank you. And, you know, it's funny because like you say, you know, we doubt ourselves and what we're able to do. But honestly, again, if you've done med school, you can do absolutely anything you put your mind to, but you have to take a step to do it. One of the most powerful things I learned in the business classes that I took was about a minimum viable product. Come up with what is the bare minimum that you need to get started and start it. Otherwise, you're going to wait for perfection, and perfection won't come. It never will come. Even once you start the business, it's going to continue to evolve. It has to, because things change, people change, the mission changes, right? Everything changes. And so that's the one thing I learned. And I think the med school and FAMU prepared us for is to be comfortable being uncomfortable and learn how to move in the midst of crises.
Exactly. Get comfortable being uncomfortable because change is inevitable. You're so right about that. You're so right about that. Well, I'm so excited for you. If you could share the address, and you can even do this later, or I'll make sure that when we share this with others, they'll know where your practices are located as well and how to get in touch with you. But if you don't mind, we are going to transition into what is the bolus round. And the bolus round is where we do our rapid fire questions. For those who don't know, a bolus is a fluid. When we give fluids in the hospital or in the emergency room, in an emergency situation, when a patient may come in dehydrated or very sick or even from an injury, we push fluids rapidly to help keep their blood volume and their blood pressure up. So we know all about boluses as physicians, but making sure the rest of our audience members, they'll know more about this round as we go. So are you ready for the rapid bolus round?
I am.
All right. So are you a warm weather vacation person or a cold weather vacation person?
Definitely warm. Yes, definitely.
All right. If you had to pick between R&B, hip hop, gospel, or Afro beats, which genre would you choose?
Man, that's terribly tough, but I probably have to say hip hop.
Okay. Why? Why would it be hip hop?
I mean, because again, I feel like there's so much transition that we go through and chaos. Like hip hop is a thing that kind of gives me this energy of like, I can do anything.
Exactly.
I feel like I'm going into war because I got to prepare for it.
Exactly. All right. If you had to pick between spades and Uno, what are you playing?
Spades.
All right. Are you soda or pop?
Definitely pop.
No.
You know, we're from the Midwest. We don't say soda.
Exactly. And last but not least, if you had to pick a prominent celebrity or prominent figure to meet with for lunch for a day, who would you meet?
I would probably say Barack Obama.
Right. All right. And favorite Black-owned restaurant in your area?
Man, so for anyone who is here in Columbus, Ohio, I would say my absolute favorite is the Royce. It's located at the Polaris shopping mall. And it's Black-owned. It's been in business now about 4 years, and you will not find it better than here.
I love it. Give us the name of it one more time.
The Royce.
The Royce. All right. So if you're in Columbus, Ohio, got to get to the Royce.
Yes.
All right. And last but not least, what organization would you like to rep? I may know what you're going to say, but I may not. So you can pick more than one.
Okay, beautiful. So I represent the Beta Alpha chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And I also represent, I would say, my business, obviously. So Life Cycle Direct Primary Care and Grant Medical Center. So for people looking for an amazing residency experience who want that full spectrum experience, definitely check out Grant Family Practice in Columbus, Ohio.
I love it. I must shout out the Beta Alpha chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, simply because, I have to do it. Our Charter Day was yesterday as well, so happy Charter Day to all of my lovely sorors. But I'm so grateful for you, Dr. Mooreland, and our experiences coming through FAMU together and seeing where you've come so far. And I'm just so excited to see where you go next. So thank you again for joining us tonight. And to my audience, always remember to dream without limits, and we will see you next time. Bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Black Med Connect podcast with the wonderful Dr. Chelsea Mooreland. We hope you learned a little bit about direct primary care, what it's like to be a family medicine physician, and a few great Black-owned restaurants in the Columbus, Ohio area. If you liked this episode, we'd love if you could subscribe to the Black Med Connect podcast, wherever you like listening to your podcast. And if you'd be so kind, leave us a review. Let us know if you're enjoying the episodes so far. If you like watching your podcast, then check us out on YouTube on the Black Med Connect podcast channel. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up. Yep. And don't forget again to subscribe to all of our platforms for social media content. I'm Dr. Weiss, and until next time, always remember to dream without limits. Bye.